you. Thank you very much. I don't allow plenty of time for questions because I realize that you've got lots of questions, so I'll try to make my opening remarks brief. Very happy, of course, to be here today. The traffic was pretty lovely getting here from Columbia. I got here a whole hour early instead of half an hour late, as I've been known to arrive in the past. So that's good, and it's a lovely fall day. I'm happy to spend part of it here with you guys. I thought I'd just begin to tell you briefly that when I was your age, I was much more interested in drawing and reading than I was in writing. I didn't really particularly care for writing in elementary school, mainly because all we wrote were reports. And I knew the reports were important, and I did them, but I can't say that I really enjoyed them. It was kind of an effort because all the reports were factual. You had to look things up in encyclopedias. We didn't have the internet, of course, in those days. And then we had to rewrite them in our own words, which of course were never as good as the words that were in the encyclopedia. And it always seemed to me a little bit on the, as I said, boring side. What I wanted to write, if I wrote at all, were stories, but basically I wanted to draw. So what I used to do, since I didn't particularly like to write and I liked to make up stories, was I drew picture stories. I would make up a story in my head, and then instead of writing the words down, which would have been the boring part, I just drew pictures to illustrate what was happening. And of course, the trouble with this is, I still have some of those drawings and the stories that I made up, but it's a little hard for me to remember exactly what they were about. Excuse me a minute. I have some kind of allergy. Which I'm sure many of us have at this time of year. So when I look at them now, I can see several themes in them, and some of them kind of the kind of thing I like to do now. Some are about orphans who run away and have adventures. And of course, when I write my books, I often think of kids usually not running away, but having adventures, because that's what I always wanted to have when I was a kid. But you know, your parents are kind of opposed to adventures, because adventures are dangerous. And they think if you go off in some lonely place to have an adventure, you'll fall off a cliff or drown in a river, or something terrible will happen to you. So my mother did everything she could to prevent me from having adventures. But my friends and I still managed to have a few adventures. And of course, if our parents caught us, then we were confined to our rooms for a while to think it over. And that meant I usually drew another story about orphans who could go out and have all the adventures they wanted. By the time I was in junior high school, though, the picture stories had gotten much longer and much more complicated. And I realized at one point that if I were going to keep on making up stories, I was going to have to write them down. And that was a scary thought for me, because since I never had really liked writing in elementary school, I had never had any encouragement for any of my teachers. Their encouragement was, I'm drawing. You draw so well, keep drawing, Mary. They never told me I wrote so well. I never got gold stars on my written reports or anything like that. So I didn't think I was a good writer. And it worried me about writing a book. That was a long thing to do, and if I were a bad writer, it would be a bad book. But then I thought a little bit more about it, and I thought, well, what if I wrote a children's book? Then it wouldn't be as long, right? It wouldn't be as hard, and it could have pictures on every page if I wanted it to. So that's what I decided to do. And I made a wonderful discovery while I was doing that, because one of the things that has bothered me with my picture stories were some things I didn't draw very well, like horses. I often wanted my characters to have adventures while riding horses, but the horses I drew were pathetic. They really were. They usually were kind of lopsided, and their heads didn't quite fit on their necks right, and their necks didn't quite fit on their bodies right, and their legs didn't quite fit on their bodies right either. Like maybe their front legs were longer than their back legs, or vice versa. And I used to worry that if my horses ever came to life, they would, sort of like hobble across the field and fall down and not be able to get back up because they were drawn so badly. But when you write a book, you can describe the horse, but you don't have to draw it. And then the people who read your book can imagine what the horse looks like. And believe me, they aren't going to imagine the kind of horses I used to draw. They're going to imagine how horses really look. And I knew how they really looked. It was just that I couldn't draw them right. So I could write a story that said the girl woke up early in the morning It was fall, and all the leaves were in color. The temperature was just right. The sun was shining. She ran outside. She jumped on a horse. She rode off across the fields, jumping over fences and streams. You know, I never had to draw any of those pictures unless I wanted to just draw the girl going to the barn. I could draw the girl going to the barn. It was a horse I couldn't draw. So that's a good thing to remember, you know, if you want to be a writer when you grow up and you think you have to illustrate your books. You don't have to draw anything you can't draw. Just draw the things you can't draw. That's what I did. So anyway, I wrote a couple of books like that, but I never really finished any of them. I would lose interest in them. I would rather go out and do something outside with my friends, and then I'd forget all about the book. So I didn't really get serious about writing until after I graduated from college, because it was when I was in college that I took a lot of creative writing classes and got a lot of encouragement about my writing. For the first time in my whole life, people said, "You really write well. You should go on to become a writer. You should try to get your stories published." Well, I didn't quite believe that. I was still kind of shy in college. I wasn't quite sure of myself. So even though that's when I discovered that I could write, I wasn't sure I wrote well enough to send my stories to, say, a magazine to get published. So I just kind of wrote stories on the side, and I still did a lot of drawing too. I draw sometimes, I write sometimes. I go back to drawing, then I go back to writing. But I didn't get very far with either one until I got a job as a public librarian. I was a children's librarian, and I read a lot of children's books as part of my job. It was reading those children's books that inspired me once again to think about writing for kids. And that's how it all began. When I was a librarian, in the children's department, reading children's books and thinking, you know, some of these books are wonderful, and I could never hope to write as well as Catherine Patterson, say, or Becky Byers, or P.B. Snyder, writers that I remember admiring greatly when I was a librarian. But there were other books, and I don't remember now who the writers were. And it was reading those books and telling myself, you know, I can write a better book than this. If this book can get published, my book can get published. So you could say, in a way, I was inspired to try to get a book published by reading bad books. Books that I knew I could write better than they were. So I found out, of course, it was much harder to write a children's book than I thought. It took years to write my first book because this was before people had computers. Computers in those days were like the size of refrigerators. People, you know, couldn't just put one under their arm and go somewhere with it. They were usually used, you know, for businesses. People didn't have personal computers. That was all to change in just a few years, but at the time I started writing my first book, it was still typewriters. And I was the worst typist in the whole world. I mean, I still am. I'm the worst keyboardist now in the whole world. I didn't take typing lessons, which I should have in high school. So I learned all these bad habits, and the way I type now is the way I've always typed. I've never learned to type fast. The way I type like this. Oh, mistake, clean it up. Mistake, clean it up. Really bad at typing. So it took a long, long time because in the days of typewriters, you know, you typed on paper, and if you made mistakes, sometimes it was really hard to correct the mistakes. If it was just a little mistake, you could use this thing called whiteout. Smear some whiteout on the mistake, type over it again. But if it was a really big mistake, if a whole scene was wrong, or a whole paragraph or something, you would have to just start all over, start all over again. So it took me a long, long time. And it took me a long time to find somebody who wanted to publish my book. I sent it to about 7 publishing companies who all sent it back to me. They didn't want it. Finally, the last one I sent it to was Clarion Books in New York City. The editor there was a lovely man named James Cross-Giblin, and he kept my manuscript for a long time. And he sent it back to me. He told me that he liked it very much. He thought that I wrote well, but he had a few problems with it. He didn't think it was quite ready for publication. And he sent along his criticism of the novel as well as several of his assistants who also read it. And he said that he hoped very much that I would take the criticism to heart, that I would rewrite the novel and send it back to him, and he would be happy. He did. He didn't say he'd have to publish it, he just said he would read it. This is what's called writing on spec. This word for writing on speculation. You're speculating that the editor might take your manuscript, but you don't have any promise that he will. So, words that I worked on it. I sent it back, and he reread it, he sent it back, and I rewrote it, he reread it, and I rewrote it, he reread it, and I rewrote it, he reread it. I rewrote the manuscript 7 times before he finally accepted it. And I don't know to this day if Jim Giblin was just as sick of rereading the Sarah Summer, that was the name of the book, as I was sick of rewriting the Sarah Summer. I remember when I sent that last version off, and I thought to myself, if he doesn't like this one, I quit. I'll just stick as a librarian. I'll never write another book. I can't do it. It's too hard. So he must have sensed I was feeling this way, and I decided to take it. So my first book, The Sarah Summer, was published in 1979. Now, I had the idea at the beginning that I was going to do illustrations for the book, and I did the cover for the book, and I sent my editor sketches and drawings, but he turned them down. He said that he hoped it wouldn't hurt my feelings, but he'd rather have someone else do the illustrations. And I think he meant that my work wasn't really professional enough to be used in my own book. So that was a disappointment. And I tried a few more times with subsequent books that Jim published, but he never did accept any of my covers. So I gave up on that idea. I thought, okay, it's a surprise, but you write better than you draw. So let's stick to what you do better and write, and let, as Jim once said, let us find someone else to do the illustration. So that's the way my writing career has gone. I have been at Clarion Books ever since the beginning. I would guess the first time I sent a book, that manuscript of the Sarah Summer to Jim Giblin was probably about 1977. So you can figure out for yourself, because I'm very bad at math, how long I've been working at Clarion with Jim Giblin. I've published 31 books in this time period. The one right behind me is my newest one. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, Where I Belong. It's not a ghost story. Don't be disappointed. I know that's what you like best, but sometimes I just get ideas for something besides ghost stories. So there's no ghosts in this book. And I have to go on working with Jim for many, many years. We're both a lot older than we were when we started, but we still work really well together. And I enjoy his comments. There are secretly sometimes when I wish he would just say, Mary, I love every word of it, just the way it is. You don't ever have to rewrite anything ever again. You're perfect. You finally learned how to write a book. But this is not true. I still do 3 or 4 revisions for every book that Jim accepts. And he has accepted practically all my manuscripts, except a couple of fantasies that he didn't particularly like. And maybe they really weren't very good because I sent a lot of them to some other publishing companies and they didn't like them either. So I'm not sure if I'm good at writing, as good at writing fantasy as I am at reading and enjoying fantasy. You know, sometimes you can't always write what you love to read. So, the one thing I want to tell you about before you ask questions, and I think that probably someone would ask this question because they always do, but I don't know when it will come up. Wait Till Helen Comes is being made into a movie. After 10 years of working, this wonderful woman, Victoria Sanchez, who read it when she was 11 years old, it's her favorite book when she was a kid. She carried it around in her backpack everywhere she went. She determined then that she was going to go into the film industry as a career, either as an actor, a producer, a director, a scriptwriter, or something. And if she did, she was going to make a movie of Wait Till Helen Comes. Well, she had to work 10 years polishing the script and trying to find someone to give her the money. That's the really hard part. When you have a script, you're trying to get a director, a producer, a film company interested in putting up the money. You have to really make a good pitch. So finally, she made a pitch. She lives in Canada. She lives in Montreal. She made a pitch to a Canadian film company, and they said, yes, we'll do it. And they moved on so fast, I could hardly believe it. The movie was set up, the casting, everything was done within a couple of months. And guess what? I was allowed to go to Winnipeg and play what's called a sort of like a cameo role in the movie. If you wait till Helen comes, you remember there's a time when Molly and Michael go to the library to ask about the deeds and everything and the property, the old Harper House, its history. Well, I'm the librarian, and I can't tell you how much fun it was. It was like the most magical experience of my whole life. I went to Winnipeg, Canada, and they found an old library in Winnipeg where they filmed. It was filmed in a real library. They had all the cameras set up inside it. And of course, all the real people who might have been in the library were gone. They have what's called extras. The extras are that's why, you know, when you see a movie and they're walking down the street and no one looks at the actors and actresses, it's because they're extras. They close the street off to the public. And all those people you see in the background, they're paid a daily wage just to walk along the street. They get fed and everything. I thought that some extras, I'm a little bit more than extra because I speak in lines. Extras usually don't. So I'm thinking maybe I'm going to look into being an extra in films in this area because it was so much fun. I want to do it again. So the film will star, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Mama. Has anyone seen Mama? Do you remember the little girl, Billy? That's Isabel Norisi. She will play and she's an absolutely wonderful choice for the part. She's a little older now. I think she's 8 years old now. But she's absolutely the most terrific kid. I just love her, and she's so perfect for the part. And she has an older sister named Sophie Norisi who starred in Book Thief, which I haven't seen. I did see Mama, but I didn't see the Book Thief. Remember the real pretty girl in the movie? She's going to be Molly. And then the boy playing Michael, I've never heard of before. I think it's one of his first roles. And the kid playing Helen, you won't believe this. I couldn't believe it. She's about this big. She's much shorter than Isabel as Heather. But she's going to be Helen. She's only 6 or 7 years old. And I didn't get to see, unfortunately, Isabel's wedding scene. But I did get to see Helen, this little girl's name. I can't think of her name right now. But they did a flashback in the movie that wasn't in the book, which shows how Helen accidentally caught the house on fire. So there's a scene where she's playing hide and seek with her mother in the house, and her mother hides in the fruit cellar and closes the door, and the father's down there too. And Helen comes running through the house. Mama, Mama, where are you? Mama, Mama, where are you? And she sees the door is open to the trap, to the fruit cellar, and she looks down, she doesn't see anyone, she slams the door shut and starts to run past, and then she knocks the kerosene lamp off the table and starts the fire. And they built this wonderful set. I didn't get to see this part, they did it later, and they're just going to burn it all down. There's going to be a real fire. I mean, this kid is going to come running out of a burning building, only it's not going to be her. It's going to be a stand-in, which would be a little person, and the little person will have all this asbestos stuff all over them, so she didn't want to burn this little kid out there. Take it, I guess an extra, a stunts person. So that'll be the stunts person's part. I did get to do the scene with Sophie, because of course, Sophie is Molly, and she comes into the library. She's so pretty. She's a very, very sweet young girl. She's probably about, I think she's 14, she's a little bit older. And I love, absolutely love. I had the costume, and they had fixed my hair, and they put makeup on me. And the whole time they were filming my scene, it would be over and over again. To get it perfect. They do 7 takes of me with my back to the camera, cameras facing Molly and Michael. Then they do 7 more takes with the camera behind Molly and Michael facing me. Then they do 7 more from this side, 7 more from that side, and then they do some up from above. And you know, the camera, that when they edit it, all this will somehow flow and fit together, and it'll be great. So it was an amazing experience, but I loved every minute of it. I got fed, they gave us great food, they put me up in a nice hotel. I had to have a Canadian work permit, which was really exciting to get a Canadian work permit. I'm going to frame it, I think. I got it someplace. Thinking about framing my Canadian work permit. So the movie hopefully will be out in about a year, I guess, or maybe more. Depends, you know. A movie depends on so many things, but the filming's almost finished. I would have stayed for all of it if I could have. You know, I had stuff to do, and I couldn't stay for all of the film, but I would have loved this question every bit of it. Because hey, it's your book come to life, and you're in it. You know, I'm in this movie. I'm Mary, playing the part of a character I imagine, the librarian, talking to these people who are also playing characters I imagine. It's just, you can't imagine what a strange feeling that is. Because, you know, they're not really, the characters come to life, but it seems like your characters have come to life, and everything around them has come to life. So, this is a totally great experience. I highly recommend it. Anybody who wants to be an extra in a film, I think, you know, it's just great. And they do feed you very well, and they pay you, so you can't beat that. Not much, but they pay you. Okay, now, to turn it over to you for questions. Now my big news is over. How about you? Do I believe in ghosts? I have a very open mind towards ghosts. I don't think I could say yes, I completely believe in ghosts, because I think, you know, that would be a little too far out. But at the same time, I would never say no. I definitely do not believe in ghosts. I try to keep my mind open, because I know a lot of people. They tell me all the time, you know, because of books I write, people are always telling me about their own encounters with the supernatural. And, you know, something exists. I can't explain it. I don't know exactly what it is. They're probably not the kind of ghosts that you read about in a story, because those are fictional ghosts. Ghosts, people who see ghosts in real life, the ghost rarely, if ever, says anything. And sometimes it never even notices them. A lot of people think ghosts are like a hologram. Like a field of energy left over from some tumultuous event, and it's still there. And some people can see it, and other people can't. But it's usually totally unaware of anything. Maybe it's doing one thing over and over again, like, I don't know, washing the dishes. That's not very exciting, but that's what the ghost is doing. It's washing the dishes, and it's not. It doesn't see you. You could walk right through it, and it wouldn't notice you. That's kind of what I think ghosts are. But I'm not sure. It could be even more than that. Who knows? How about you?
So, what would be your favorite book that you wrote, and what do you think the next one that would be made?
Well, I've always said my favorite book is Stepping on the Cracks, and I think that is true because I put a lot of myself and my life, my childhood memories that I have, friends I had, enemies I had as a child. And I did have some enemies, including my 6th grade teacher. But we don't need to go into that. For that reason, I think it's my favorite book. But I also really like this new one, Where I Belong, which is a story about a boy who doesn't have any place to belong. He's a foster child. He doesn't get along very well with his foster parents. He doesn't get along well in school. He's always in trouble for not paying attention, for drawing when he should be, you know, doing something else. And he fails 6th grade, has to repeat in summer school, so he can go on to junior high school, or middle school, which he doesn't even want to do, because he doesn't want to go to middle. He doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to be left alone. And so he finally finds a place where he can be all alone, deep in the woods. He builds a tree house. And this is a picture of him sort of peering out between the branches and the leaves of the wood. And he thinks he can be left alone there. Nobody will bother him. The bullies won't chase him. You know, his teachers can't find him. His stepmother can't nag at him. I mean, his foster mother can't nag at him. But of course, things have a way of happening. People have a way of coming into your life when you least expect them. So by the end of the story, Brendan is actually made some friends, which he thought he never would have in his life, have a friend. But he does by the end of the story. Yeah.
When did you get interested in writing ghost stories?
Why did I initially like writing ghost stories?
No, when did you get interested?
Wait. What got me interested in writing ghost stories? Well, I think it's just the mysterious quality of ghosts. You know what we were talking about? Are they real? Are they not real? If you met one, what would it be like? Would you be scared? Would it be like a wicked, evil spirit, like Heather? I mean, like Helen in Wait Till Helen Comes? Or would it be a friendly sort of a spirit, like some of the spirits in my other books? I Fell in the Garden. The ghost is a friendly little spirit of a child who wants to help somebody who's still alive in the world. So it's just fun for me to explore that. And I can think, of a situation, like wait till Helen comes, where a family has merged, but the kids don't get along with each other, and Molly and Michael don't get along with Heather's father, and Heather doesn't get along with Molly and Michael's mother, and there's a lot of tension in this story. And through the intervention of the supernatural world, the tension is eased and the family is given a chance to come together. But I could have written it without any ghosts at all. I could have just written a totally realistic story about how Molly comes to accept her stepsister and how her stepsister comes to accept her. But it's fun. Having a ghost in there, kind of kept things up somewhat and made it a little bit more exciting to write. And so I think that's why I'm interested in using ghosts, because they give you a lot of room for your imagination. It's like, here's the whole real world that you sense with your senses, your five senses. Like, it's fun to think, there's the twilight, so beyond all that. If you could just somehow lift the curtain of the real world and peek behind it. It's like if you're working back there in the shadows, ghosts, witches, who knows what. So, yeah. Okay? Toad. Definitely Toad. It's his nickname, I guess, but no, and I actually got that name from a boy who lived in College Park. He was a big boy, and everybody called him Toad, and I don't know what Toad's real name was.
Okay, boys and girls, please put your hands down while she's giving the answer so that everybody's not distracted, okay? And then when she's ready for another question, then you can raise your hand.
That's good because it is distracting.
It is very distracting to have hands raised.
I'm always afraid somebody's going to say, I feel sick, I need to go to the bathroom. And I wouldn't be answering because I think, he was just waiting to ask a question about the book and then all of a sudden he'd throw up all over the floor.
So keep your hands
That wouldn't be fun, right? How about you write down the pink? What is what? The scariest book. Well, in some ways, it's probably up to the reader. I think my scariest book is probably The Ghost of Fairfield Hall. Because Sophie, the ghost in that story, it makes Helen look like a nice little girl. Or a nice little ghost, whatever. She's just so wicked that it scared me when I was writing the book. Like where is this wickedness of Sophie coming from? The things she does, the things she says, what she's angry about, what she wants revenge for. That's not me. I don't have a personality like that, I think. But there might be some deep dark part of me. Obviously that produced Sophie. And that makes it kind of, I think, a scary book. I think Sophie is really a scary book. How about you in the Thatcher? Where do I get my ideas from? Well, they come from everywhere, really. Getting ideas is easy. It's making the idea into a book. I could just, a lot of my ghost stories have come from seeing a place that made me start thinking, this looks like a really scary place. What could have happened here? Why do I feel that it's scary? And then my mind starts working on that setting. Like the church and Molly, Michael, wait till Helen comes. I actually saw a church like that had an addition where a family lived, and there was a graveyard behind it. And when I was little, I was really scared of things. I was so scared of things. I was scared of, particularly of death and dying and ghosts and graveyards and dark places. Those are the things that really scare me, like many people. I'm not saying I'm very original to have been scared of those things. Many people are. But it struck me how I have felt as a child as my parents had decided to buy a house or a church or something like that backed right up to a graveyard. But there were dead people buried right outside my bedroom window. I would never have gotten a good night's sleep in all my life while I lived there. And my parents would have just said that I was too silly, that I was too imaginative, blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't believe anything about my thought there might be a ghost there. So I thought, well, that's what I'll do. I'll write a story from the point of view of a girl like me, who's very scared of death and dying, graveyards and all of that, and how she was forced to confront all those fears.